Welcome to Podcast on the Brink, your weekly dose of Indiana basketball news and discussion, brought to you by the Assembly Call and Inside the Hall. I'm your host, Jerod Morris. Join me live at assemblycall.com every Thursday night and immediately following every IU game for our live IU postgame show. And visit InsideTheHall.com for complete coverage of IU basketball and to join the discussion in the Inside the Hall Premium Forum. On this week's edition of Podcast on the Brink, it is, unfortunately, our second exit interview in 3 weeks as we are talking with Stu Jackson, former IU beat writer for the IU Rivals site at thehoosier.com, who has taken a new position in Los Angeles covering the Rams. We're obviously very, very excited for Stu as we talk about, but disappointed that a trusted, respected veteran voice, another one, is off the IU beat. And so we talk with Stu about that, about his experience covering IU basketball, about the newspaper journalism industry as a whole, and then obviously a lot about the program and what he sees about this year's upcoming team. I think you'll really be interested and intrigued by the answer he gives at the very end when I ask him what about next year's team will surprise people the most. So a lot of good stuff, a wide-ranging conversation with Stu. I think you'll really enjoy it. And this week's episode of Podcast on the Brink is sponsored by IU football tickets, because IU football season right around the corner. Obviously, it's crazy. Football season is so close, which of course means that basketball season's coming up too. But before we get to basketball season, there are IU football tickets to have, games to go see. And led by head coach Tom Allen, the Hoosiers kick off the season on August 31st against Ball State at Lucas Oil Stadium, which should be a lot of fun. Then obviously they host Eastern Illinois on September 7th in the home opener at Memorial Stadium. Visit iuhoosiers.com or text 812-855-4006 for more ticketing information. That's iuhoosiers.com or text 812-855-4006 for more IU ticketing information. And get out there and support Tom Allen and the football Hoosiers. All right. Here now is our conversation with Stu Jackson. All right, and we are joined this week on Podcast on the Brink by former IU beat writer Stu Jackson, who is now out in LA. We had his people get in contact with our people and set up this podcast. Our second exit interview in 3 weeks, which is I don't know, it's kind of sad. But welcome to Podcast on the Brink, Stu. It's great to have you here, although a little disappointed to do it under these circumstances, I have to tell you.
Yeah, no doubt. I wish it was under different circumstances, but nonetheless, I'm still happy to join you guys and looking forward to our conversation.
Well, and to be clear, disappointed because we enjoyed your work and really appreciated, the perspective that you brought to IU basketball, but extremely excited for you and the new position. So why don't you just let everybody know, folks who might not have seen it on Twitter or read it on Rivals, what are you doing now?
Yeah, so last month I accepted a seasonal staff writer position with the LA Rams, which is an NFL team. If you're, for those of you who maybe are just focused solely on basketball or don't follow the NFL as closely. And so, just felt like it was a really good opportunity and one that I should jump at. I want to work in pro sports in some capacity. And so doing it out here in one of the largest markets in the country, it was just, felt like it was a no-brainer for me as much as I enjoyed my time covering IU basketball and football and everything else that came with, recruiting too. It just seemed like it was the logical next step for me to take.
And you're already out there, right? Already out in LA?
Yep. I got out here Sunday, well, really Saturday night, and got started earlier this week on Monday. So been out here for a few days now. It's been good so far.
And how long were you on the IU beat?
So I was on the IU beat full-time from June of 2016 through the end of July this year. So about a little over 3 years. Going back further than that, I was involved in various capacities as a student with some of the internships I had. I worked for Alex my freshman year when he and Justin were, running Inside the Hall. And so, full-time, 3 years, but really it's been, in some capacity since, I would say 2012 when I started at IU.
Okay, so because I was going to say, if it was June 2016, that means that you missed Indiana's last great run where they won the Big Ten and made it to the NCAA tournament. But at least prior to that, you got to cover some good, successful Indiana teams.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because we've talked about Devontae and Doron. If they leave, they'll be the first 4-year guys. Did you just not want to be the first beat writer to be on the beat for 4 years and not cover an NCAA tournament?
Yeah, I was wondering if they kept a statistic like that of any kind, but yeah, no, it was it is kind of tough, as when, at least especially for on my side of things, and I'm sure Alex can relate because he's got a premium board of his own, but it's tough when any team isn't playing across a network, whether it's Rivals or 24/7, isn't playing as well as they have in the past, or isn't experiencing the same level of success as they have. Because in a lot of ways, it kind of sets the tone on the message boards. And as much as you try to give people the freedom to share their opinions and just share their thoughts on how they think the team is doing, it can be kind of tough, especially if when a team experiences a stretch like IU did this spring, where they lost 12-13 at one point. So it was a different time, to say the least. When I was covering the team full time, would have been fun to certainly be back in that environment again. I did travel and cover the 2016 NCAA tournament run, at least prior to them going to Philadelphia. So, it was different, certainly, compared to some of the things I had seen and covered as a student. But I still enjoyed it nonetheless.
Bring up some interesting points too. I'm just kind of curious from your perspective. You talked about dealing with the message board and fans and social media just in general. What do you feel like the temperature of the IU fan bases? You can maybe talk mostly about basketball, but also football. Do you feel like there's positive momentum in terms of what the fans are feeling going into this basketball season? Do you think people are kind of generally not excited? I'm just kind of curious from where you have been, the last couple of years on the rival site and being on that board. What was the general vibe that you were getting from people?
Yeah, I think more than anything, it's just uncertainty, because you lose Juwan Morgan and Romeo Langford, at least, speaking specifically to this upcoming season, still bringing in several talented guys. But at the same time, Indiana fans, they're constantly going back. I would say a vast majority are constantly going back and comparing whatever coach IU has hired since Bob Knight to the success he had and what he accomplished. And so because of that, that's what's it's creating some challenging expectations, or it has, I would say, for pretty much every IU coach that's followed in his footsteps. And so, I would say, people are, kind of uncertain just because, in year one and in year two, they felt like, okay, this is, it's early in Archie Miller's tenure. We can afford to be patient a little bit and wait and give him some time. But especially after, bringing in a top 10 class nationally in 2018, that was highlighted by, of course, Romeo Langford, and, just seeing how last season unfolded. In addition to that uncertainty, it seems like people are starting to get a little bit less patient, or more impatient, I should say. And, it's as a result, people aren't really sure what to expect, or, I guess maybe the optimism isn't quite there, compared to, when Archie Miller was first hired. And so it's kind of created a strange environment where, like, and it's also, I think, kind of contingent on, whether Jerome Hunter is available this upcoming season, and, how that plays into it. Football wise, I think people are, trying to be patient with Tom Allen too. And they are willing to be, because they're seeing the level he's recruiting at. with just some of the, the most recent classes they've brought in, especially the 2019 class. And so I know that that's kind of, it may not seem fair given the explanations I gave for each program, but that's just kind of how I see it based on, kind of what I saw on the boards and just, kind of managing and monitoring that real-time feedback.
How surprised were you last season? We sat next to each other pretty much every home game for the most part. How surprised were you just at how last season unfolded based on what we saw? And I know there was a lot of close calls in December. There's a lot of games where you felt like, well, maybe they shouldn't have won that game, like the Louisville game, for example, the Butler game. But they found a way to win those games, and then all of a sudden the bottom falls out. I guess how surprised were you as that was all unfolding, and kind of looking back on it? Is there anything that stands out in terms of what the primary reason was in your mind for things transpiring as they did?
Yeah, I guess I would just say I was surprised, especially with how Big Ten play unfolded, just because non-conference play, even with the Big Ten ACC Challenge loss at Duke and some of the other things they experienced, you felt like, especially with that buzzer-beating victory in the Crossroads Classic, that Indiana was in position to play really well once Big Ten play picked back up, and as they sort of closed out the non-conference play as well with some of those bye games, so to speak. But it was really surprising. I think people really underestimate just how much Romeo Langford's thumb injury really impacted the team. Just because again, that was something that didn't become public knowledge until I want to say he declared for the NBA draft in April, and so that to me, I think, had a bigger effect than most people realized. So, and just I think the biggest thing that I point to as far as how things were different and the impact that had was just like I talked about earlier, the losing 12 of 13 between January and February. That to me was the most astonishing thing. I still felt like even with Romeo's limitations and some of the other things they were experiencing, some of the health concerns and whatnot, they were still talented enough to avoid that. And so I don't know why. I still don't understand how or why that happened, but I guess to me that was sort of the most surprising thing, and just the thing I point to that was like, that's it seems like the obvious answer, but I mean, there's nothing else that I can point to or that I've seen in my time covering the team that caused such a dramatic turnaround in one season.
Going into the upcoming season, if you had to give a reason for optimism for IU fans, what would it be for basketball?
Yeah. I would just say, I think that the chemistry should be pretty good. And that's no disrespect to Romeo or Juwan, who were very talented and did tremendous work for IU in during their respective amounts of time with the program. But it did seem like, and this is just my opinion, that a lot of times they were either trying to force the ball to Romeo or Juwan, and in some cases that was the best option because of the shooting struggles that that team endured last year. But I also think there were other times where they probably could have shared the ball a little bit better, or had better rotations and things like that, where it wasn't just defaulting to either of those two guys automatically. And granted, I understand why, because those are your two leading scorers. Those are arguably your two most talented players on the team. But I think their departures, as important as they were last year's team, will, I think, cause this year's team to look at, okay, like what can be done better? How can we be a more cohesive team on both ends of the floor, especially on the offensive end? And you also look at just the two guys that Archie Miller brought in this year's recruiting class. If you exclude, Joey Brunk being a grad transfer, of course, but actually I should probably include him in that. Just when you look at the 2019 additions, I'll say, to this year's team, Trace Jackson Davis is a terrific kid, really hard worker, another Mr. Basketball. Armand Franklin, same thing. Jason Delaney, his head coach at Cathedral, has had nothing but great things to say about him. Joey Brunk, of course, I saw was the offseason champion in the weight room. You've got 3 guys coming in that all have tremendous work ethic, and that's something that I saw a lot of fans from time to time, at least on my board, complaining about the effort and being frustrated with it. Those are 3 guys you're not going to have to worry about that with. And again, you're going to have Joey with the team for 2 years. He's going to 2 years of eligibility and whatnot. And you're going to have also Trace and Armand, who Trace, who knows how long it'll be before he heads to the NBA. But regardless of the amount of time that these guys are with the team, they're going to have the right mindset, and one that I think Indiana fans are going to appreciate, and one that they've been wanting to see, or that they wanted to see more of, I should say, last year, but now probably will, or I would be surprised if they didn't, because of those 3. So all that combined, I would say, is reasons that I would be optimistic about Indiana this upcoming season.
Stu, where are you from originally?
So I'm originally from Indianapolis. I grew up in Carmel. But yeah, up until now, I've been in Indiana my entire life, basically. So.
Okay. So you grew up kind of understanding Indiana basketball and what it means to people in the state of Indiana. I'm curious, even with that background, as you reflect back on the time that you've covered Indiana, what was your welcome to the IU beat moment? Either where it completely fulfilled the ridiculous expectations you had for what it would be like to cover IU basketball, or I guess on the flip side of that, where it kind of shocked you to where you were like, wow, okay, even though I kind of thought I knew what to expect, this was a little bit different than what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, I would probably go back to my freshman year. One of the first assignments I had for Alex was getting video highlights of Hoosier hysteria, and so I was positioned along the baseline among the photographers, and just walking out from under the tunnel, the one closest to the media workroom. So I think that would be the southeast corner of Assembly Hall. But anyway, as I'm walking out under that, I knew expectations were pretty high coming into this year because of the postseason run and just the success from 2011-12, and so I figured that Hoosier hysteria was going to be pretty well attended and there was going to be a lot of interest, but to walk out there and see the entire place full, I want to say it was at least hour before the whole thing even started. That was just astonishing to me. Again, I'm not suggesting that I'm questioning the passion of the Indiana fan base here. It was just for somebody that had never covered an IU game before, and had just watched games on TV and things like that. That to me was just really special and astonishing, just to be a part of that environment and to be able to experience that. And I would also say too, just when I was in 5th grade, I had a teacher who was an IU grad and wore that passion proudly on his sleeve, had an IU flag in his classroom. When anytime IU played Purdue, if IU won, he was, taking the cape or taking the flag down from, where he hung it up in the classroom, tying it around him like a cape and parading around a teacher
awesome.
2 doors down who would happen to be a Purdue grad. So that to me, also kind of sticks out as far as just something earlier back. Wasn't necessarily a welcome to the IU beat moment, but just sort of kind of, understanding, what IU means to people and how passionate people are about it. So
as you reflect on the people that you got to cover while you were on the IU beat, who were some of the most interesting? And I was, when we ask this question, especially about this area, you often hear about Victor and about OG, and some of those names often come up, and certainly talk about them if they're at the top of your list. But I'm also curious if there's someone that maybe the fans didn't get to know as well that you did, that you really found interesting, that you kind of wish maybe fans had gotten to know a little bit better?
Sure, that's a great question. I mean, it's not an unknown name by any means, but I would say probably, I'd definitely put, Victor Oladipo and Yogi Ferrell up there. Those guys were, awesome to talk to and work with. But I would say too, just, Jordan Hulls as well. I mean, he was somebody that, I got to know a little bit better after he, left IU and graduated from IU and started his professional career. And, I talked to him from time to time when he'd have his, his camp here in town at Bloomington South High School. And, he's someone that, I think could be a coach someday. He's just, incredibly insightful and thoughtful. And, I would hope that, IU fans thought the same, if they ever watched one of his press conferences or listened to what he had to say. But, he was somebody that, I guess it doesn't apply as much to, during my time covering the team completely, but, just, I guess as I kind of reflected on sort of, the chances I got to talk to him and, press availability settings, and then getting to know him after his IU career ended, that's somebody that, I guess definitely stands out, and I would say is up there as far as, I think people are starting to get him to know him better because he's obviously active on social media, and I'm sure people see all of his posts from time to time, but that's probably the one that, jumps to my mind, at least immediately.
Stu, I'm curious, you're kind of shifting from working for, a third party covering a team to working now directly for a team, if I understand it correctly. Mm-hmm. How's that gonna, you're a journalism guy. I mean, how is that adjustment going to be for you in a role like that? And kind of what, is there a different approach, I guess, when you're working directly for the team than there would be, working for an independent site or somebody that's not connected directly to the organization that you're covering?
Yeah, so I mean, it is a little bit different. I'm still kind of, in the training and onboarding process, so to speak, and because it's the preseason, I'm still kind of getting a sense of, exactly what my responsibilities are going to be, because it'll probably be different during the regular season. But yeah, I mean, it is different, but it's also something that, it's something that I look forward to, and I kind of embrace. I will say it's it's just, it's a different experience, and it's one of those things where, like, I think one thing I will say about it is what gave me confidence that this would be, a good opportunity is just, when I interviewed with, the team insider, Miles Simmons, one thing he told me was that, he believed his job was to, tell the truth and cover things like he saw it, or as he saw it. And so, for me, I know I'm sure in some instances you may not see that, it could vary, from organization to organization. I know I had a mentor tell me that, for Sam Smith, when he left the Chicago Tribune to cover the Bulls for their team website, Gar Forman, the Bulls owner, had the presence of mind to realize that, if he tried to, control Sam in any way, or modify whatever, he was going to write, or again, insert any control over that, the fans were smart enough that they were going to be able to see right through it, or know exactly what was happening. And so, kind of giving him that freedom, was something that, was a really smart decision, and something that, what was kind of explained to me by my mentor to sort of be on the lookout for if I did choose to pursue this avenue. Just, kind of ask about it and see, how the organizations view that position and that operation. And so because of that, I felt like from my conversations with everybody, within the Rams internal media team that they have out here, I felt like it would still be, it's still closely aligned with the things that I value and kind of fit what I was looking for in that regard, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you had a chance to listen to our conversation with Mike a couple weeks ago, but I mean, there's a couple topics I want to hit on. Just first, the kind of the changing of the IU beat. It's going to be a lot different next year. You're obviously going to be watching from afar, but I mean, we all are still very saddened by kind of what happened. What obviously happened last season with Hutch. That was, that's something I think about every day, and just how much we all miss him and not having him around covering IU. But also you're gone. John is gone as well, and Mike Miller's gone. I mean, is there something that we don't know about here that suggests that me and Jerod should be looking for something else to do? I mean, how do you explain this mass exodus from the IU beat?
Yeah, I don't know, Alex. That's a great question. It is kind of unusual because even going back to my time covering a student or covering the team as a student and in some capacity as an intern or whatever, it always felt like I saw the same people in the press room or at games pretty much every time one was held or every time there was a home game or whatever, or even in most cases for road games too. And so I just maybe people are just maybe it's just wearing people down. I don't know. I mean, it was a very long season, and it's I will say for me personally, I won't speak for anybody else on the beat, but when you're covering a team that experiences again that losing 12 of 13 or the lack of success over that long of a period of time, it can be tough to write different things because it feels like you're writing the same thing over and over again. And so I'm not trying to suggest that the lack of success of the IU basketball team wore on people or had an impact on people leaving or anything like that. But it's just one of those things that I'm sure given how things have gone over the last two seasons, it's it can be kind of a challenging environment, and maybe just people saw it as a time to branch out and do something different for their professional growth.
How much did the state of this industry and kind of I'm not gonna there's a lot of people I feel like who have been in journalism and gone into PR, different things. I mean, there's been some actual recent grads, I think, of IU journalism school who have just kind of said, hey, I'm going into something else because I don't necessarily see that this is going to be a viable path forward for me. You tried kind of the traditional path, obviously, the last 3 years, and I feel like you did a really good job, and I know you got a lot of valuable experience out of it. But just how much did that on a day-to-day basis kind of weigh on you, what's next for me in this? How much did that kind of sway your decision to leave the beat, and just in general your prospects for moving up in the field of journalism? Because I know you saw the news this week that Gatehouse bought Gannett, so now it seems like there's going to be even more kind of consolidation with newspapers and things like that. So I'm just kind of curious how much the state of the industry and in general kind of had on your feelings on being in this profession going forward.
Yeah, I would say that I'd be lying to you if I didn't feel like I had at least some concern about the state of the industry and just kind of where it was headed. Part of the reason when I was in school, I wrote for the Indiana Daily Student for a year. It was my sophomore year, and that was terrific experience. That was the kind of experience I needed to, cut my teeth and have a foundation to build on for, all the other opportunities that would come. But as I was, looking more and more at the landscape, I just had a hard time, looking at like, okay, what's being done what kind of innovative things are being done? How are companies being forward thinking? What are they doing to adapt to an increasingly digital environment, especially over the last, 5, 6, 7 years, however far back you want to go. And I just felt like I wasn't seeing enough of that thinking, or I guess I wasn't confident enough in what I was seeing, even though efforts were being made. I shouldn't, discredit, the different things that, news organizations are coming up with to try to adapt. But I just wasn't entirely confident in that. And I didn't feel like it was going to be, something that I could count on for, going back to, our, friend, the late Terry Hutchins, he was in his position for, I think last year was his 20th season on the beat. And so, I just didn't see that as something that would be possible for me, or something that, at least in this current climate, was going to happen frequently or be a possibility. That being said, I'm still interested, and I will be following and seeing like how these, how all these different news organizations, adapt and all the different things they come up with to try to, meet the demands of their readers in this environment. But, really, I felt like I wanted to do something that was, still on the digital side and, something that I felt like, might be, a little bit more secure.
What, if anything, have you said to some of these younger guys now? We have a couple new guys coming in working for us now, who I think are going to do awesome. Dylan and Cam for this season, and we just had two really good guys move on who are looking for jobs now, Seth and Ben. But kind of as you've gone now through your professional career for 3 years, kind of what advice would you give those guys, to young people that are kind of coming out wanting to break through in the industry? Is there anything you would have done differently, or is there anything that you think that people really need to understand? Because it's, a lot of people have asked me over, and Jerod, we've had conversations. I think one time it was kind of weird for me to talk about, but you asked me, like, we talked about the history of the site, and you asked me a lot of questions. And, it's a lot of people have kind of these thoughts in their head that, hey, I want to go cover the Lakers and work for the LA Times. And this business is not really set up to where you can just go out of school and kind of launch right to the top, unless you're, a prodigy of some kind. And there's a lot of hard work that goes in working up the ladder. And I'm just kind of curious from your perspective, what are you telling these young guys if you're talking to them now about kind of the business as a whole and what they need to do? And is there anything you would have tried to do differently as you came up through the ranks?
Yeah, I would just say, if you're specializing, that's probably the wrong approach to take. For me, I mean, I tried to do as much as I could with, getting experience with WIUX, doing radio, or, even back in high school, like just audio editing and learning how to take pictures and things like that. Figuring out ways to make yourself irreplaceable. Like, that's probably the best advice I can give, is because, especially when with the size of some of these newsrooms that you see, and just how they're consolidating things and the responsibilities that are constantly being added on to reporters. If you're focusing solely on writing and being a good writer, I mean, that's obviously an important part of it, but you should also know how to take good pictures and record and produce podcasts and things like that. Basically just having as strong of a multimedia background as you possibly can. That was the thing that, I tried to sort of, follow, the approach I tried to take when I was in school and even in my, full-time position with Rivals. So that I would say is just, I don't think I would necessarily do anything different. I would just say that, having that approach is probably, at least for me specifically, that's what worked best. And that's, kind of what I would suggest, or the advice that I would give when it comes to, some of the other, sports media students who are going through the program and whatnot. And I think they're doing a good job of, of stressing that and preparing preparing students for that. I have no reason to believe otherwise. So,
Stu, bringing it back to the team just a little bit. Again, we talked about you took over, right after the 2016 season, and that was still kind of there was some, I guess, a little bit of turmoil. I apologize. There's guys doing lawn work right outside my house, if you can hear that. Obviously an exodus of some really good players after that season. But no one, of course, expected the major drop-off that happened, at the end of the next year. But as you look at where the program is now under Archie Miller and where it was then under Tom Crean, how do you feel about the future trajectory of the program as compared to, reflecting back, how you felt about it when you took over?
Yeah, so I would say that the trajectory is one that, again, based on sort of the feedback that I would see regularly just from message board posts and whatnot, is there's just some uncertainty, just because whenever any new coach takes over a program, regardless of the sport, it's going to take time. Now, did people expect Archie Miller to sign a top 10 recruiting class in 2018? Probably not. I mean, I think that still probably caught. I don't think that was the expectation going in, even with all of the talented in-state players they were pursuing at that position. So I would say that there's some uncertainty. I think there's still reasons to be patient. It's just, again, when you go back to the high expectations that have long been held by the fans that follow the program, that asking for patience is probably a tough ask, and especially when fans have watched the success of teams like Michigan, especially under John Beilein when he was with them. So I think again, kind of going back to what I was saying earlier, I think there was I would say that if the honeymoon period, that and all the good feelings that fans experienced immediately after Archie Miller's hire 2 years ago, and the spring of 2017, if that wasn't already over, at that recently, then it certainly is now. And I think people are expecting to see results, because now they know that Archie Miller can recruit at a high level with with the class that he brought in, and also even the guys that he brought in this year. And so I think now fans are wanting to see the product on the court correlate with the talent that's being brought in, and the talent that is on the roster, I would say.
The in-state recruiting obviously has been going well. You covered that closely. Were you surprised at all about Trey Galloway when he committed? And now that you don't have anybody to answer to on any message boards or anything, are you willing to give us your prediction for Anthony Leal on Friday? Do you have any inside Stu scoop on that one?
Yeah, well, I'll start with Trey Galloway. It didn't surprise me all that much. I would say that, I think I was surprised that maybe he didn't take longer to make this decision, just because at the time, when I was covering the Adidas regional qualifier event over Memorial Day weekend in Chicago, I'd learned that, Kansas and North Carolina had started showing some interest in him. And they were trying to get him to visit. And so I thought, well, obviously if any kid hears from those schools, that's going to get their attention. And obviously that never, they watched him, during the summer evaluation periods and everything, or at least, Kansas did. But it was just one of those things where, Indiana had built a really good relationship with him. And I think for Trey especially, I think he can appreciate playing for, as the son of a coach himself, he can appreciate playing for one in Archie Miller, who is, as most people know, played under his dad when he was playing high school basketball in Pennsylvania. So in that regard, it wasn't too surprising. It was more of just when it was made rather than who he picked, I guess. Regarding Anthony Leal, I don't know, man. I mean, I honestly think it's a coin flip, just because, and as I mentioned this, before, Indiana's still recruiting quite a few players at the wing position. I don't know exactly, how Indiana plans to, map out these 4 scholarships as far as who they want to take. I've always felt like it should be, a point guard or a ball handler, a couple of wings, and then a big or a post player of some sort. But, they may have other ideas in mind. But, because of, they're also showing interest in guys like Matt Cross and Jalen Bridges. And so I don't know if that'll have an effect on Anthony's decision, or maybe it is, and maybe it's pushing him to, commit sooner. And, maybe the coaches are telling, those guys, hey, there's, this spot is available. It'll, be first come, first serve. And, he's going to be the first one to jump on it. I don't know. I think Indiana's got a good shot, but I will say that, Stanford, it always seemed to me, did a better job of making him a priority. And, the Indiana offer, I felt like kind of came late in Anthony's recruitment, but obviously that, doesn't seem to have too much of an impact if he's got them in their top 2. But I could see it going either way, honestly, just given, all the, external forces kind of at play here in his recruitment.
Yeah, I agree with you in that, feeling like it's a bit of a coin flip. The only thing that kind of gives me, and I'm not making a prediction by any means, a feeling that it may be more kind of leaning towards IU at this point is just kind of the timing of when he's making the decision, because it seemed like originally he was going to wait until a little bit later in the fall. And, the fact that Galloway just committed, and you mentioned IU maybe, kind of wanting to accelerate things and get a couple commitments, it kind of makes me feel like that just the timing of it feels like it could be good news for IU. But like you, I think it's, I mean, a lot of people ask me, how could you go to Stanford? And I'm like, it's Stanford, man. It's if you go there and you're successful and, maybe even go to grad school there or something like that, you're set up for life after basketball in a way that very few places in this country from a higher education standpoint can set you up. So, I don't think there's a bad, he can't make a bad choice in this situation. It's not like he's picking between, IU and some lower tier SEC school where people would be scratching their heads saying, how did that school get in? I mean, this is Stanford. It's, if you're, obviously every kid that goes to school has a dream of playing in the NBA, but realistically, it's not, the percentages aren't in your favor unless you're, a Romeo Langford top 5, top 10 recruit. So you got to think about being set up for life after basketball. And I definitely think IU can do that very well, but Stanford is obviously very impressive too from that regard.
Yeah, I mean, he has a 4.3 GPA, so he's an incredibly smart kid, and he would be silly not to give them a close look. I mean, he's being recruited by Northwestern too, which is one of the premier academic institutions in the Big Ten as well. So yeah, I absolutely agree with you there.
I'd be willing to make a prediction. I think he's coming to Indiana for all of the reasons that you guys said. No inside info, but I just think all the signs are pointing to it. So we'll see. Stanford's clearly a legit contender and should be, because it's a heck of a school. But
if he doesn't commit to IU, please send all complaints to @Assembly Call on Twitter.
Yeah, please. If I'm wrong on that one, I'll send them my way. So just to kind of wrap things up here, Stu, as you depart the IU beat now, and I'm going to take a couple of them off the table. So you can't say the people on the IU beat, and you can't say the food in Bloomington, because those are obvious ones. But what are the things that you're going to miss the most about covering IU basketball and IU football?
I would probably say, just kind of going back to sort of my first introduction to IU and the passion and all of that, just the environments. I remember it was my second year, trying to remember the first first Duke, the last Duke game that was at Assembly Hall when Marvin Bagley was on Duke, and a lot of other talented freshmen, obviously, but just environments like that where after a big 3-pointer or some other big play, you could literally feel the building shake. I mean, I don't know how else to explain it. Like, just, I'm like sitting there typing stuff and I can just feel goosebumps, like, all over, crawling up my back and stuff like that. That to me is, one of the things that I always enjoyed was just being a part of those, those marquee matchups and even Big Ten games too. Just anything that was, like a top 5 or a top 10 matchup, or, obviously any of the, IU Purdue games, like that was always, that to me is probably the thing that, if I can't use the people or the food in Bloomington, that's what I would default to. I would say is just, all the different environments, non-conference home games, even some of the, road games, especially at, places like Michigan State, that, I'm really going to miss that, because that was, I felt like, one of the coolest privileges and experiences and parts of the job that I got to experience.
Last question for you. Now that you've been on the beat, you've really seen the inner workings of the program, you've seen the facilities, and, really you're in a unique position that not many people are in, that I think you really have to have managed an IU basketball message board to really know, which is the passion and the expectations of the fan base. So with the breadth of knowledge that you have about all of that, do you feel like Indiana fans' expectations for their program are fair for what they want out of the program, and why or why not?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say that I think they are fair. I know, that, that's not necessarily an opinion shared by a lot of people, but to me, when you look at, because I know, at least, from my perspective, we've, a good amount of season ticket holders who subscribe to the site and are on the boards quite a bit. And, depending on, how much money you're contributing to the varsity club, let's say, for season tickets. And, for those that don't know, the varsity club's the fundraising arm of IU athletics. If you're contributing, a significant amount, you're donating a significant amount to program, and you're not seeing, it's just like anything else, and you're not seeing a good return on your investment, you're going to be frustrated. And especially if, that organization or company or program or whatever you want to use for this example, isn't meeting the expectations, or, performing at a level that it has shown that it can historically, there's every reason to, understand why fans would be frustrated, and also why they would have, high expectations for, a program, returning to, to that kind of success at some point. That being said, there still needs to be, patience with coaches like Archie Miller and, whoever the coach is for IU 40 years from now. Time needs to be given for, these coaches to be successful. And so, it's perfectly fine to have the expectations that Indiana fans have. I don't think they're too high. I just think that, we're in a society where, it's, immediate gratification is very prevalent. And, if a new hire is made, whether it's football, basketball, any sport, fans expect to see results or a turnaround immediately, especially if they have, an impressive resume, or if they've done things statistically that have been noteworthy as far as turnarounds. And so, yeah, I think it's very much, it's fair for fans to have those high expectations. I don't think there's anything wrong with them. I just think that, it just has to come with some patience. Those things, those expectations are fine. It's just, there has to be an understanding that it is rare this day and age for, turnarounds to happen in the amount of time that I think most fans want, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. And last question for you, as we look ahead to next season, what player or just element of next year's team do you think is going to surprise IU fans the most? And I suppose you could take that positively or negatively, but what do you think would be the most surprising, kind of based on what you know about the team for next year?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think Devontae, if I can just pick like a specific player, I guess I'll just go with that. I think Devontae Green's really going to surprise a lot of people. Eddie Cotton with
there's room on the bandwagon. Come join me.
That's right. Eddie did a really nice job. He wrote a feature on Devontae. I think it was this spring. It was around the time of the NIT, but really tremendous job kind of highlighting Devontae and sort of, his upbringing and what he's gone through. And, he's someone that, showed a lot of promise at the end of the season as, a guy that could kind of carry the scoring load. And I think, it's kind of weird to say like, well, could a guy who's already been in the program for 3 years really surprise a lot of people. But I mean, he's had his ups and downs, but I think he really puts it together this year and is in position where everything finally clicks. And, he realizes how important he is to, Archie Miller and this team and kind of the role that he can fulfill and really helps IU out in that regard. So, kind of an unusual answer, I'm sure, picking a veteran, but that's just sort of how I see it. I feel like he's a guy that, is going to be in good position to, be a leader and someone that, Indiana can really count on. And I'd probably say the same thing about Deron Davis too. I think, those guys are, Devontae's kind of, at least in front of the media, he can be kind of quiet and soft spoken and whatnot, but, Deron's got a terrific personality and he's someone that, very much can be, the vocal presence or one of the vocal presences for this team this upcoming season. By
the way, I saw a recent picture of Deron. I think he was back home in Overland. He was looking pretty svelte. Did you see that picture?
Yes, I did. Yep, popped up on my Twitter timeline.
Yeah, tough to take too much from just one picture, but for a guy like Deron, where conditioning and just kind of the shape that he's in has seemed to have such a big impact on his career, that was at least somewhat positive to see. So hopefully, if that's the kind of mindset he's had this offseason, if he can carry it into the season, I would. It's probably one of the most enjoyable things about being a college basketball fan is seeing guys when they've gotten through 3 years and they're about to be a senior. How do they grow? How do they develop? What kind of evolution do they have? What kind of momentum do they take into that senior speech? And those two guys have had such ups and downs, and it seems like have never quite found their role, or they've gotten injured. And it just, I just really want to see both those guys kind of, play up to the capabilities that we know that they have. I think that would make the season really rewarding. So hopefully what you just said comes true, because it would obviously go a long way toward Indiana getting back to the NCAA tournament too.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well, Stu, thanks, man. Thanks for joining us here. Thanks for all your coverage over the years. And we'll be watching from afar and wishing you luck as you're out there in LA now. And if you're ever down in San Diego, obviously you can go down and say hi to Ryan, my co-host from the Assembly Call. But yeah, man, good to talk to you and good luck out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. And I'll be sure to I'll be following your guys' work closely as I'm kind of keeping tabs here and there on how IU basketball and even, other outlets with how IU football is doing as well. So always great to talk to you guys, and I'm sure we'll be catching up here soon.
Absolutely.
Stu, it won't be the same on Press Row without you, man. I have nobody to get me a water at halftime anymore. So
yeah, you're gonna have to send. You'll have to send Cam, I guess, to do that for you from Section K or something. Or
I guess I'm gonna have to have him come down the escalator and everything and bring me a drink at halftime. So yeah, good luck, man. Look forward to following your work, and we'll stay in touch.
Sounds great.
Cool. Thanks, Stu. Thank you for listening to this episode of Podcast on the Brink. We always appreciate you being here. Remember to join me and my co-hosts for more IU basketball talk at assemblycall.com, and visit Alex over at insidethehall.com for complete coverage of Indiana basketball. If you want to support Podcast on the Brink, here is the single best way to do it. Tell anyone you know who loves IU hoops about us and suggest that they subscribe. Podcast on the Brink can be found on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere else podcasts are available. Tell your social media followers, email your friends, text your family members. For weekly discussion about IU basketball, they need to be subscribed to Podcast on the Brink. We'll talk to you next time. Go Hoosiers.